cell. The way we use that in kind of our systems work, even in our own institution, and we work on a day in, day out basis with 3 post-secondary institutions on one campus, which is a challenging thing, as you might think. But we always try to really see our team composition, our theme that we're working on, and our aim statement. We try to adjust what level we think it kind of sits within the system. And then before we begin really finalizing the aim statement or even collecting data, we try to move it up one level higher and place the problem, the challenge, or the aim statement there. So if you just take kind of a census or a population of your working team and kind of see at what level of the system they think they kind of operate at, and everyone kind of think about, well, what does one level up from us kind of look like? And what would happen if we actually push the aim statement there? And I'll tell you what that's done for us. It just broadens the scope of possibilities. It totally changes the problem space. It'll also have you consider other stakeholders that you may not have thought of and getting their eyes on the problem itself. The other really cool thing it does is once you start analysis, whether it's quantitative or qualitative with voices, you tend to only be able to go down in the system, which you're getting to how or analysis. So the further up you can begin the project in the system and thinking, it'll actually change the way you analyze the problem as well. So give yourself the time, for those of you who are in that early space, really to think about, where do we sit within the system? What's one level up from where we think, and place the problem there, and then kind of start to work on it. You kind of see from this thing, you can really only answer questions about why by looking up in the system, because you have to look outside the system in the larger containing systems themselves to answer why questions. And those are really important questions, obviously. How questions can be actually defined through analysis and looking down. Here you're trying to figure out how something works. So obviously you need a great blend of both synthesis and analysis. We tend to focus so much on analysis, but don't forget about the synthesis part. And it's a great place to start. The t-shirt slogan there, some of you may recall, you look up for purpose, you look down for function in any system. So no matter where you're at, it always kind of tells you where you kind of need to look as you try to address certain questions. That's thought number 1. Number 2, don't forget, be very aware with your teams of how you're trying to treat the problem. When we were together, some of you in attendance, we actually looked at 4 ways of treating problems themselves, and it kind of forms a hierarchy of effectiveness from least effective to most effective. So the top 2, absolve and resolve, are 2 ways of addressing problems that don't work on causes, but tend to really work on symptoms of a problem. Where the bottom 2 ways of treating a problem, solve, which is quintessentially the only thing I think a lot of us people think is available to us, and dissolve, actually try to work on the causes themselves. And we have kind of a definition here, just a real quick cheat sheet about what's the difference. When absolving, you just ignore the problem, you move away for it, you hope it goes away, it solve itself. You choose purposely not to engage. Most of us on this are not in that boat, very reason why you're participating in this cohort. But the second one down, I think a lot of us could relate to, it's managing the problem. You're resolving it. And how are you resolving it? Well, you're employing behavior that you previously used. That's kind of the mindset of, hey, we did this before, it seemed to work, let's do it again. But resolution or management really just treats the symptoms. It helps a community, or in your case, a college, a university, or an institution really in itself think about how do you help cope or deal with the problem. But it doesn't work on causes, primarily just the symptoms. The last 2, solving it, you're creating some individual customized responses for students and learners, and you're actually for the first time treating the causes. The problem is you're treating the cause of the problem, but you have to do it over and over and over again because you haven't eliminated the conditions causing the problem. And that leads to the last one, dissolving, and that's what dissolution actually means. You're now redesigning the underlying system or set of conditions that are causing the problems in the first place. So a great way to kind of use this thinking, these last 2 are the most powerful. They work really well in combination with each other about thinking about, in the context of solving student problems, what have we learned that can be applied and extended to redesigning the system so we don't ever experience those problems again. So these last 2 play off each other extraordinarily well. So I think really, if you ask yourself, given our topic or our theme of the 5 teams, what problems around that theme are we constantly experiencing day to day, over and over again? And that can always help you kind of prioritize what types of things you want to look at in your aim statement, or where you, after you have your aim statement, where you want to focus your work. So what do we constantly have to solve that we wish we could dissolve? And last, I just think it's really important for all of us to remember there's a fair dose of problem solving and systems building at work here. And they're very, very different. And I just wanted to remind us of what makes these two things different as well. Problem solving, again, is a lot about analysis, dealing with parts, taking up things apart, fragmenting systems, asking what's wrong here. It can be kind of deficit based at heart, because of the nature of the question, what's wrong here that we're trying to get rid of. It tends to be somewhat backward looking in time, and you're always growing away from something as opposed to actually heading toward what it is you ultimately want in terms of the system design. Where systems building is really the flip of all that. It's holes and putting new holes and new people together. Always aspirational and asset-based or abundance-focused. It's always what do we want to create, what can happen, what we can, what is working, what matters. It tends to be more future-oriented, and you're always trying to grow toward that thing, an excellent, ever-evolving system, as opposed to moving away from something you don't want. So it's really easy to always slip back with your teams to problem-solving mode. But as leaders and facilitators, this is a great opportunity to kind of shift them back and try to see if you can keep them in the systems building space as long as possible. Remember, if you're really doing systems building, you're trying to dissolve and get rid of the stuff on the left anyway. So it's kind of a great reminder. The more the right you do, hopefully the less of the left that you have to do on the chart. So those are the 3 reminders. Just place things one level in the system higher before you begin if you can. Keep in mind the different ways of treating problems. It's important because if you don't have the right approach, you're really not going to be able to get at system redesign. And just make sure you understand and help everyone remember the difference between problem solving and systems building. They're the 3 reminders. Here are the 3 kind of tools. And I think this might be a good time for a lot of you who are just kind of getting started to, some of these I think are really low-hanging fruit that might help you kind of help visualize the system, but also create a conversation among your team. The first is just systems journey mapping, and we use a pretty simplified version. And let me tell you how this PDF works. Everything connects back to the Dropbox, but you don't need to know that. I've linked each of these pictures. As you can see, my cursor, if you can see it, kind of turns into a hand. Anything you see in this PDF, you can just click on it, and it'll take you right to the files so you can actually access the tools themselves. So we have a whole host of 11 by 17 kind of worksheets. So if you're kind of thinking about doing some system mapping, putting the student front and center and thinking about the different contexts of your problem, this is a great way just to pop this off, print this off, give it to the team, and start having a conversation. We also have a set of posters that can be put out at a very kind of larger size if everyone wants to kind of come and see a particular tool set. And these are really useful of kind of creating these kind of facilitated dialogues to think about your theme, your aim statement, an actual student in that mixes well with Lily's empathy mapping about what people are seeing, thinking, and feeling along the way. So these are some really nice ways, I think, just to look at what are the contexts that matter for our problem, what are some of these touch points and which currently exist or we could create to exist, and what stakeholders are just paramount to make this actual journey map seamless throughout that process. We have a set of instructions for facilitating this. They're pretty easy, but again, if you just click on that, it will take you right to that. So we've tried to even provide you with, okay, my team's together, we want to use this tool, what do? We have the facilitation instructions handy for you as well. They kind of look like this when they're simply done. Some of you we talked about the town of Somerville, Massachusetts, and how they were actually trying to tackle childhood wellness. And they used this context journey mapping approach really to think about a day in the life of a student and all the different touch points along the way in which they can actually improve the health choices and the healthiness and wellness of students throughout that day. And then they just organized all their work around that. Our team frequently in our own organization uses this to help folks to everything from engagement, enrollments. I know Christopher talked about, we're not even sure what this kind of enrollment system looks like necessarily, or at least all of us. These are great maps to help you begin to kind of piece those things together to see processes and see different steps. So that's a way if you just want to kind of get a flow of how the system currently works and what's it like to kind of experience it from a student perspective. One level deeper is the same thing, but instead of just solving the problem for one or just mapping it out, how might we redesign it? And that's the second tool, which is solve for one, extend to many. It's our kind of solution dissolution thing we talked about earlier. Very similar looking map. But now what it kind of encourages you to do at the top is to identify a specific student who encountered a very particular problem in the system itself. And the group thinks about how on that kind of situation would be solved or resolved. And then based upon the learning of solving that one instance, what would you do to actually kind of extend the learning to actually redesign the system? So the top part is all about how we would solve it and what we learned. And the bottom part is what would we have to change so we could extend this learning to many so we can dissolve that problem once and for all. Again, the worksheet version, also have the post-it version as well. And we have the complete set of facilitation instructions for this exercise as well, which is a front and back walking you through the process of how to kind of use these micro stories around students. So you have a very concrete situation, a very concrete entry point into a real problem and your aim statement itself. Because this one's a little more complicated, I've also included a video of my colleague, Dakota Policki, who will actually walk you through step by step the instructions as well for those of you who are more visual in your learning. Some of these, the outputs, again, we use this in our own organization at the Community Education Coalition to redo all of our processes, both internally and externally. This is an internal kind of application of people experiencing a problem and serving internal customers to our organization, and how we really had to take what the system looked like on the top and actually then try to redesign it and remap it, which is what the bottom is. And I like this because it really shows you kind of existing or past state and the new state when it gets done, what that process will actually kind of be like. The other important thing it does, and I think it's really important for all of us, is to remember where a problem shows up is not where a problem forms. And so the key insight here, and it's color-coded, actually on this particular kind of process map, and again, you'll get these so you can zoom in and actually read it, but is to identify what context did the problem show up, where did it show itself, but more importantly, how far upstream do we think we could move to where we think it actually formed, and then you mark that, and now you have two contexts, where it showed up and where it formed. And then the idea is just to see if you can't figure out what are the stages or the contexts in between those. So for those of you who context maybe a nebulous thing, really just identify the context where it showed, the context where you think you could work at it, where you think it most likely formed, and then really those things in the middle to bridge those steps usually identify themselves pretty easily. So I've got a number of examples here from kind of more the complicated internal to some of the more external student-facing micro stories, the person, the problem, and how this team actually redesigned the context and in process identified what existing work they wanted to build on, what work they needed to improve upon, and what new work they thought they could undertake together. Again, both of these things on a singular page to hold all the work together. For those of you in the transition team, here's an example for a military to education transition example of this that our own team, again, had to work through when we realized that the process was somewhat broken and fragmented. So I tried to give you a transition example of what this work kind of looks like using kind of the same tool. And then we also kind of gave you another example that we thought kind of, I think, brings out the thing around health and human services on the area. So I tried to find examples that we've done in the past of this tool that apply to some of the aim statements and the themes of the group. The last one's just the 80s of systems change. It's a very, very kind of easy diagram. It's a great way to get the current state of a system put out, but also then brainstorm with the group, what else could we be doing? And it's based upon this model of behavioral change, which it's called in their model, it's the 7 E's, and ours is the 80s. We've added equity and evaluation onto the piece. But each one of these kind of E's is a behavioral change approach. And the idea is the more of these behavioral change levers that we can actually pull, the more success hopefully we can make it for lots of different people within the system and different contexts and different ways of interacting with the system. And this approach has had tremendous results, not only in Australia in trying to reduce tobacco control, and that country had one of the greatest reductions in tobacco control using this. But now the Netherlands, Sweden, Finland, they use this for carbon neutral and a whole series of different approaches. But the process is pretty easy. You've got 8 quadrants. And it basically, for each one of these, you say, hey, what are we doing around policy? You put a note on. What are we doing around incentives? What are we doing around awareness? What are we doing to help support those people so we can help them achieve these goals? X is what we do is how's the context itself, the built environment, the immediate surroundings and the things that are there. And then how are we measuring and evaluating these pieces? And you just kind of begin inventorying it. Current state in one color. Again, you can use a poster. You can kind of put current state in one color, and then the group can have a great conversation to look on the map and just see where there's openings and holes about, well, we're not pulling these 2 levers as much as we could or at all. So what else might we do? And you just keep evolving this map over time, and it gives you a great dynamic picture of the different things that the group is really trying to do to bring about behavioral systems change. It kind of looks like this, again, for our Shape Up Somerville. You can really kind of see for each of these things where they kind of mapped out not only what they were previously doing, but also what they pledged to do collectively together. And now they have a great visual to understand which of these kinds of tactics and strategies are aligned with certain behavioral change pieces. And then finally, I just put together some additional resources for your consideration that were tied back to your team themes, team topics, and your aim statement. I included some very simple student journey maps that we'd help teams put together around mental health. This was a process for our own kind of institutions that we had for not only our K through 12, but also our systems of higher ed. They just identified what the map, the journey kind of looked through. It has 6 steps, but when we started, there were only 4. And during the process, we realized there were 2 missing, like prevention and also follow-up, actually getting the system kind of to form a circle as opposed to just a straight line. So just trying to lay out that process path on the top was invaluable for us. The group then generated some guiding principles about when this kind of stage of each of the journey goes right, what's it look like? And then they mapped in all their key stakeholders to kind of show what role everyone plays, who had responsibilities, kind of in what parts they were. And then they put some just nice performance indicators for each of the steps, just to say, how do we know this particular stage in the process is actually performing up to the principles that we put forth? So again, 1 page. Nice. This also helped to deal not only who's playing current roles, but new roles and expanded roles that the team may actually have to play itself. But I thought it was simple and a nice way of looking at a high-level process map around health. Now, Christopher said we may need to do some more in-depth, maybe process mapping. Yes, and so did we around the same area, same 6 stages. But I think this shows you how you can also get a little bit deeper into actual process pieces. This is kind of the same map you saw on the previous one, but it's been expanded to include process steps. And this holds together, if you can see in the bottom with the red, about 20 stakeholder organizations, not only within the school and the college, but also within the community itself. And this is the only way we could really figure it out of how to have a robust, seamless process between the institution and the community if we didn't have such a map here. Also, the mental health had come up. There's some other work we had done about everyone, a whole coalition kind of organizing around themselves around this continuum of care, which is a pretty widely known kind of framework in the healthcare industry. And I also just put sometimes when we kind of get all the projects we're going to do together and begin to advertise, how we kind of frame it all back together. Those would be your teams to the left, the first column. Your aim statement would kind of be what's phrased here as guiding questions. But this process and approach just guys ability to see what every team's kind of working on, but also kind of the discipline of making sure you have a good balance of quick wins, a few things you'd like to pilot and learn from, and then larger scale systems things that you kind of realize are going to have to be addressed. And then one fun one for our belonging group or team on the call today. This was done by one of our friends, Dave, out in California, California State University, Chico campus. He was interested in student belonging and basically just had the simplest method I ever saw. He had a survey for students, but he also just brought them to this big map that he just hung on the wall. And he said, hey, where do you feel at home? Where's home for you? On the campus, and they placed their dots and then they wrote down specifically where it was on a card so he could actually connect everything kind of back together. But it was an amazing way of not only, I think I skipped one there, of showing, you know, the different places visually, again, taking the invisible, belonging, and making it visible and tangible and concrete in a very fun way. And the students built this themselves. But then Dave just went down to the bottom on the directory and then just put the little dots, you know, where everything kind of lined up. That could see where belonging energy is high and where belonging energy is kind of lower. It kind of formed little bar charts so you could see intensity. But the things that were really surprising are the things that aren't even on the directory where students indicated one of the number one places and number two, if you put the two together, that they felt like they had a highest sense of belonging and where they felt at home and most comfortable and safe was the creek that actually runs through the campus and the Rose Garden that actually adjoins that. So, you know, who knows, you know, sometimes the incredible insights that those can generate. But I put those kind of as additional resources on there just based upon the aim statements I saw and the topics of the group that are there. So again, we're there to help on any of those tools. If any of those are of interest to you as you kind of start your work, we'd be happy to provide any coaching. But again, you should have the tools, you should have the kind of the instructions to facilitate any of those exercises that we've provided. So Lily, I'll kick it back to you for other thoughts, insights.
Thank you so much, Jack. It was a wonderful like refresher, I think, of the systems piece, but then also some really practical and tangible tools and facilitation guides that I think, you know, really resonate with many of the emerging projects of our campus teams. So thank you so much for sharing that and for your willingness to maybe brainstorm back and forth if a team has a specific question around use of a tool or even just thinking about the challenge that they're working on. Does anybody here have any questions that y'all want to ask Jack before we go? No questions. Okay.
Easy. They're making it too easy.
Okay, everybody. Well, I also, you know, I just want to thank you for your for your work that you're doing. I really do hope that you see a benefit in your own work, either because you happen to be a host institution and this is a compelling question for you all, or because as facilitators and collaborative partners, we are still better deepening our understanding of how do we use these tools. Maybe this isn't in my exact context, but now I'm getting practice and I know how to do this in my own context. So really, this is the experiential learning that we're hoping for. So thank you all. If you do have if you want to have a meeting with Stephanie or myself, or certainly any of our experts that we've worked with over the year, don't hesitate to reach out and set up a team meeting, you know, with your group. Maybe we can join in if you have those meetings set up, or even just for an individual conversation. Happy to do that as well. Our next Community of Practice meeting is June 18th, Wednesday at noon. So I hope that y'all just keep moving forward and reach out if you need us and have a wonderful kickoff to the summer. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye, Jack.